Hi there VC, Steve Whitty here, time for another video, and this week's video I'll be focusing on albums that released in 1976, and obviously they'll be turning 50 this year. So I'm going to show 10 of what we consider to be my favourite albums from 1976. So without further ado, let's start off. And first one is Boston, their debut album, and in previous videos, some of the early videos, I have mentioned how big an impact this album had on me, particularly at the time when I was given money just after my father died, and I went and brought the cassette of this album. And pretty soon afterwards, when I started working, I found myself a vinyl copy. It's just a great pop rock album. Tom Scholz just nailed it on here. Obviously, it takes a lifetime to record a debut album, and these songs would have been honed and crafted over a period of time. The band sounded tight, it sounded good, and it never got any better than this for them, to be honest with you. I know they've done Don't Look Back and other albums, subsequent albums, which I've never really sort of explored, but yeah, this is one of my favourites. Next up, and now a lot of these albums would have been records I brought in my sort of youth. So next up, it'll be Kiss, Destroyer. This is a reissue. It's called what's called a priceless reissue from Mercury. When I was about 16 years old, I was all over Kiss. I brought a lot of their albums, like Alive, Alive 2. I'd had a copy of this, but I somehow lost it. So when I brought this, unfortunately, it was a mid-price reissue, and the only difference is between I think the cover more than anything. But apart from that, it sounds great. It's just a great album. I used to play this all the time as a kid. I just saw Kiss as a sort of fantasy band, particularly with the makeup. And in the UK, they weren't really taken that seriously, particularly in the early 70s. We got everything else going on with punk and everything. But yeah, that's a great album. Another album from my youth, it's AC/DC's High Voltage. Now, this is the original sleeve that came out when it was issued. Obviously, now all the reissues have got the picture of Angus on front. This, again, this is an album I used to play a lot in my youth. That's partly because I didn't have that many records, so the ones I had, I played to death. And I just loved that whole thing. It was a good introduction to AC/DC. For those that don't know, and I think most of you do know, some sort of amalgamation of the Australian releases at the time. The High Voltage is a different cover in Australia, and has a different running list, so to speak, and it was on the Albert Productions. Those are pretty expensive. I've seen one recently, I think when we were out on the travels. Another album from that period, it's Finley's Jailbreak. Their proper breakthrough album. Yes, they did have a hit with Whiskey in the Jar in 1973, but that was sort of attempt by Decca to sort of cash in on their Irishness a little bit, and that first lineup sort of split up, imploded not long after. Regrouped, Phil Lynott regrouped with Scott Gorham and Brian Robertson to do the twin guitar, which sort of based on Wishbone Ash. By the time they got this, became a success. I think this might have been something like their 6th album. Now today, this would never happen if you hadn't done it by his first or even second album. That was it. You were done for. So it was, and it was their last chance as well. And you know, they had the songs on it, Jailbreak, Cowboy Song, and more importantly, they had their big hit single, Boys Are Back in Town, which sort of elevated their career. And for a few years, Finley were on top of the world. Possibly the biggest pop artist in 76 would have been ABBA. This is Arrival. And this has really got the hits on there, if I can read it. No Me, No News on there. Dancing Queen. Everybody gets up to Dancing Queen. They just had it. They nailed it with the image, with the songs more importantly. The songs were just sing-along, catchy, great pop tunes. That's what makes ABBA stand out from the rest of the bands from that period. A lot of bands had the look, but not many, in fact very few, had the songs, and that's what ABBA had. Now recently I've just found a record that came out in 1976 from an artist that I do have a bit of a soft spot for, and this is Randy Crawford's debut album, and it's quite fascinating. Obviously what they're trying to image her on is a bit like Minnie Riperton, who was popular at that time. It's a great album, very jazz infused, jazz pop. She does a version of this Don't Let Me Down, Beatles Don't Let Me Down on this, which is a great version. And then she does the closest song that closes side one. If I've never been to me, and that I only know that song because it was a number one in '82 for a singer called Charlene, and it's such schmaltzy rubbish. But this is really a good version. Just a really good voice. As I say, I've got a few Randy Crawford albums. I wouldn't say it's a guilty pleasure. There's no such thing as guilty pleasures. I just really have a nice soft spot for her voice. Very soothing. As you get older, you discover new acts, and then you go through their back catalogue. And one such act is Steve Miller and this Fly Like an Eagle album. Very space-like. The title track is very space-like. And you forget how popular Steve and how big Steve Miller Band were, particularly in the States. And it had a few hits in the UK as well around that period. Just great stuff. I can see where else he's on there. Yeah, just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful songs. I've mentioned about British reggae. That probably the best reggae album by a British artist is Kansas Revolution by Steel Pulse, and not too far followed by UB40 as well, Signing Off. But this gives it a bit of a close run as well, as was that debut album. I suppose with reggae, British youth were finding their own voice through reggae. You see Bob Marley, around this time, Bob Marley might have been living in the UK as well. A lot of bands, sound systems floating around, but Aswad really struck a chord, and this is a wonderful album. I mean, they sort of moved towards sort of like pop, but and they had number one with Don't Turn Around. But this sort of starts it off, and there's some really essential albums by them that are worth having. Another band that I discovered later, though they did have a hit with the opening track on this album, and another hit single as well, is Modern Lovers. It's not original, this is a music on vinyl reissue, but Roadrunner opens the album. It's just a great song. This is just a wonderful album, and I think the other hit they had was Egyptian Reggae as well. Jonathan Richman, just a wonderful artist. Modern Lovers albums are worth having, but this is a really good album, and yeah, it stacks up in 1976. And then I suppose if I had to have a favourite, it would have to be Rush 2112. I can't really say much about it. Again, a bit like Thin Lizzy's Jailbreak, this is an album that saved the band's career. And Rush had Caressa still hadn't done as well as what the record company had hoped, and Rush was sort of like in mountains of debt, and they took this brave decision: if we're going to fail, we'll fail on our own terms. And the result of this was 2112. Everyone knows that Neil Peart had been reading I think it's The Arrowhead by Ayn Rand, or something like that. Found it. I'm not too sure. You've been reading Ayn Rand, sort of like, and this sort of influenced the whole ethos of 2112. Fits the first side of the album, and it's just wonderful. Just a wonderful track. And then the other side, it's by no means a perfect album, because obviously they put all their efforts into side one. You've got great songs like Something for Nothing and Passage to Bangkok, but there are a couple of other duffers on. Well, I wouldn't say duffers, that'd be a bit hard. But Tears, the ballad, I think this is about the only attempt they ever did for a ballad, and sort of sinks a little bit. But it still stands probably out there as probably my favourite album of 1976. I've seen a few of these floating around. I thought I'd get this in because of it coming to the end of January, and it doesn't look too good in February. So hope you liked my choices. If you like what you see, thumbs up, thumbs down, love the interaction, feel free to leave a comment. I will get back to you. So VC, whatever you get up to, make sure you take care of yourselves, keep spinning, more importantly, keep on smiling.